Howdy folks, check this out. You know it's a cold day in hell when the two scales line up. I didn't think it could get this cold anymore in the Canadian Rockies. Let's warm the cockles of our heart by looking at a neat little hot air rework station. Let's get right into it. I want to thank Banggood for sending this to me, and as usual I'll have links below to what we're getting here. Let's get into this thing. So this is, okay, first off, Banggood's minimalist shipping. It doesn't cost much, but boy, you take a chance. I wish stuff was protected better. Yeah. So, this is the KSGER hot air rework station. And this is their take on the 858D that is quite popular. Now all these things, all these 858Ds and their various versions, they all come with the same hot air wand. There's two primary ways hot air rework stations deliver air. One is through a separate unit with a pump that's driving air through a hose. These ones have a little squirrel cage fan in them. Now I do have the actual hose version. This is an AOU 968A combination station, but since I got my KSGER T12 soldering station, I don't use the soldering part of this anymore, so I'm just using this great big thing for hot air, and that's the one reason I wanted the dedicated KSGER hot air rework station, because this is taking up lots of bench real estate, and I've been so impressed with the T12 soldering station. I've got a separate review on that. I'll link to it below in the description if you wanted to see it. But these things are amazing. And then I can get rid of the AOU and clear up a lot of bench space. It's also got a magnetic switch in it apparently. So when it sits in the holder, it automatically shuts off. Now that was another pain with this thing. It didn't come with any holder. So I had to buy that separately. And the only problem is, I got another thing here, I'll talk about that in a bit. It comes with tips, but of course this solder station already comes with 4 tips, or nozzles if you want to call them. And here's our little base, and these have got a magnet in them, so when you put the wand in, it turns the unit, or it shuts it down. And as far as the control head, so just like the T12 soldering station, their hot air rework station is controlled by an STM 32-bit processor. Very similar menu layout, we'll go through that. And there's 2 versions of these. You can get them pre-built, which is the version I got, or you can get the kit version. And we'll take it apart and look inside. I'm going to save that to the end of it. A lot of people I know aren't interested in what's inside, so we'll go through how it works first, and then at the end of the video we'll take it apart, so you can see inside both it and the gun. Now the one thing I didn't like with this, but there's no other option, was the hot air nozzle or gun is direct hardwired to the control unit. And what I did is I got a GX connector, an 8-pin GX connector, so I can modify this and put a connector on here. I'll do a separate video on that for anyone who's interested in that little project. Came with a power cord, which I didn't expect, but yeah, that doesn't do me much good here in North America. Oh, look what else it shipped with. North American to Euro converters. Hunky way to do it. Yeah, I'm just going to use a standard it uses the C13 plug, C14 input here. So yeah, any C13 plug will work for you. And it is universal voltage, apparently, 120 all the way up to 240. The 4 size tips you get are 4mm, 5mm, 8 and 10. That's just the diameter of the outlet. And these fit on the dingus end of the hot air gun, bayonet style. There's little dimples on them, and you just line that dimple up with this groove and twist clockwise, and that's how it locks into position. This is stainless, the actual heating element outlet. The nozzles are not stainless. Oh, but the end is. These are rated at 700 watts, and like I said, they're fairly universal for all the 858D stations. You can find them separately, which is nice, so you can replace them if it ever craps out on you, and they're not expensive at all, range in price from about 12 bucks up to 18 depending on where you get it. It's quite light, they're balanced quite nicely. Yeah, it's fiberglass reinforced plastic, so yeah, you can probably kick it around a bit. As far as the actual station goes, you've got 4 little rubber feet. It's made from extruded aluminum, identical pretty much to the T12 soldering station. However, it is about an inch longer. These are about 6 inches or so. Yeah, just over 6, about 16 centimeters. And the soldering station, the T12 soldering stations, are around 5 inches, 13 centimeters. On the back end, we've got the C14 input for the C13 plug. It's fused, of course, just like the T12 station. Plugged in at the RS end. Here's our power switch. A little light. Heard the fan and the heat gun turn on for a little bit. Probably doing a self check. This is a power switch to turn the heat gun on and off. So you can have the unit turned on, but the gun turned off. If we push the switch in, now the gun is turned on. If you put the gun in the magnetic base, it will also turn it off. Okay, now we'll just take a peek at it. Oh, one other thing I noticed, this has got the thick faceplate on it. It's not the thin flush mount one. I don't know if that's just a luck of the draw when they pull it off the shelf, but it is different from the photo on the sales page. It does say it's an updated version, so maybe that's why it's got the thick faceplate. Who knows? Other than that, though, everything's the same. It's got the index push button, dial selector, and of course the nice OLED display. If you've got a T12 soldering station, this is all going to be intimately familiar. So I've got the wand out of the cradle because this will show a couple of different things depending on if it's in the cradle or if it's out of the cradle, and if you've got that little power push button on the back turned on or off. So with the button turned off, it shows power off. If we turn it on, it's operating. And if we put the wand in the magnetic cradle, instead of power off, it shows standby. In power off mode, it shows the date, the day, and the time, of course. We've got the temperature, the sensor up in the heating element of the hot air gun, and then this temperature here is referencing either the NTC temperature sensor in the handle of the gun or the temperature sensor in the processor. You can change between either. Now when we turn it on, okay, it shows the set temperature, 100 Celsius, and the actual temperature that the sensor is reading. And to dial that up, we just turn the dial. Let's go up to 140, or actually 150 Celsius. And you'll see this go up to 100%, the power output. And then it's dropping down as it comes up to temperature. Now it's just maintaining the temperature. And the other thing that's interesting is this is a count up timer. So as soon as that gun comes on, this starts counting up. If we put the gun in the cradle, you'll see the time come back up here. As soon as I take it out of the cradle, it starts a count up timer again. Don't really know the purpose of that, but now you'll know how long you've been using it. Oh, and this is the flow of the fan. As far as our temperature selection, we can go all the way up to 500. I should point out that this only reads in Celsius, not Fahrenheit. So if you hate Celsius, pass on one of these things. Check out the fan flow. So to set fan flow, you press this in, and there you can set your fan speed anywhere from 20% fan speed, up to 100%. And you're probably going to use this mostly around between probably 40 and 60. This thing's putting out quite a bit of airflow, much more than my Aoyu hot air rework station does with the big noisy pump. That's the other nice thing. This is so quiet compared to that Aoyu, and it's not vibrating and making everything shake. So yeah, I'm really looking forward to this little unit. Oh, and one last thing. If we do power it off, here I'll put this in the cradle. See, the flow has increased to 100% and it's turned the heating element off, and it stops. Alright. All it's doing there, and my OAU does that as well, most of them all do it, it's just when you put it away or turn off the little push button, it will turn them off and run air through them to slowly cool the unit down, which prolongs the life of the heating elements. Now let's go through the menu real quick. Again, if you've got a T12 soldering station, this is all going to be very familiar. So to access the menu, you just hold the button in, and we've got 13 different fields. First one is stepping. This just dictates the resolution of both your temperature steps and your airflow steps of the fan. So it's set to 10-degree increments and 5% increments. And you just hold it in to get to the next one. Cold end, like I'd mentioned before, you can select between either the NTC thermistor up in the heat gun handle or the CPU. And this is just a calibration. The way I set these, when I first turn the unit on, I'll just make a note of what the room temperature is, and I will set this value to that temperature. Buzzer, simple, on or off. If you don't want the buzzer binging away, just turn it off. Operational preference. This allows you to adjust either the temperature when you first turn the knob or the fan speed. You notice I was setting the temperature just by turning the knob. To set the fan speed, I had to push it in and then turn it. I do select my fan speed more than my temperature. I usually have a set temperature, and I usually play around with the fan speed. So in that case, I would like to set this to flow first, and then I don't have to press it in. I can just dial the knob to turn the fan speed, and if I want to change the temperature, I press the knob in and turn it. But that's totally up to you. Whatever you find you use most, you'd probably want to have that selection first. Screensaver, just like the T12 version, you can turn it on or off. You can select how long it takes to go into screensaver mode, anywhere from a minute up to 60, and all it does is it moves whatever's on the screen around so all the same pixels aren't illuminated all the time. 6 is password, so you can lock the unit out if you're not around. Not going to use that at all, but some people would probably want it. Language, you've got 2 options. Hopefully we're speaking English, somewhat. 8, system info, just shows the version of software, and it also shows real-time power input and frequency. Date and time, this is where you set your date and time, no big deal, and it's in 24-hour mode. It's the only option you've got. Real-time clock adjust. If you find your clock is running fast or slow, you can adjust this by dialing up or down the error rate. Real-time clock initialize just resets it. 12 initializes everything back to factory settings, and 13 is exit. See if the nozzle is grounded to our ground pin on our power input, which it is on our C14. So that's good to see. Now to get these little heat wands or heat guns apart, very simple. They've just got a threaded top on them over the stainless heating sleeve, and you've got 2 Phillips screws in the bottom. This cord, by the way, it's quite flexible, but I checked it with my soldering iron and it isn't silicone, so it will melt, but it is quite flexible at least. So there's our 1/2. Should note that there's the air intake for the fan, the squirrel fan, it's only on the one side. It's not on the back side. There's no louvers in there. So you're drawing air in through here and it's blowing it through this little snorkel up through the handle of the heat gun and past the heating elements. So it's just a little 24-volt brushless squirrel cage fan. Got a little circuit board here with our NTC and the other connections. It's 8-wire conductor. See if I get this right. We've got 2 for the heating element, 2 for the fan. Got a common, which is also our ground, and then we've got 1 for the temperature sensor up in the head of the heating element, one for the magnetic reed switch, and one for the NTC temperature sensor. I think that comes to 8. As far as the heating element goes, so it's just a ceramic core with the heating elements. One thing to note, these don't run on 24 volts like the T12 soldering stations do, so don't think you can just buy one of these and hack them into your T12 soldering station. It's a completely different animal. This thing is getting line voltage, so these heating elements are getting 120 volts in this case, and it's being controlled through a triac in the unit, and we'll take a peek at that. Just wrapped in mica sheet here. Got the reed switch under a little bit of silicone potting compound, and then of course the little circuit board with the NTC on it. This is the strain relief, appears to be nice flexible silicone as well. So that's the gun. Now let's look at the head. Quite a bit different than the T12 soldering station, as I had mentioned. Completely different here. The entire control board doesn't just have the switch mode power supply on it, it's also got the STM 32-bit processor, the triac, which is controlling the heating element, and as far as the display goes, it's very basic. It's just running the OLED display, and it's got the board for the push button indexed interface knob. Here's our power input from our C14 plug with the built-in switch and fuse, and it's just running line voltage to these little screw terminals to power the board. You've got a through-hole small little fuse as well here, so it's double fuse protected. Goes through some filtering, a choke, an NTC, there's a MOV, there's our transformer underneath the backup battery. KSGER sure seems to like to put the battery on top of the transformer there. I've got an optocoupler, and this is not the MOSFET which is switching it. We've got I think there's our little switching MOSFET down there. This is a very low power output power supply. Really all it needs to do is run the logic circuit, the OLED display, and of course the fan. The main power is line voltage through this triac, and this is a BTA 16, so pretty big triac, can handle up to 16 amps. What are the BTAs? I think it's 600 volts, so yeah, it's a pretty beefy little triac. Got a nice little heat sink on it there. And yeah, as you can know, and there's our little push button switch that turns the heat gun on and off. And everything's plugged in, so you can easily unplug everything. But this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to do it in a separate video. I'm going to put a GX16 connector in here, an 8-pin GX16, and then we'll just put the plug on the other end here, so it's easy to plug the gun in and out of the unit. Not too sure why they hardwired. Probably cost savings, right? So I've got it powered up. A little green LED is on. I don't know if the camera's picking that up. Bright little bastard. And I've got the pokey bits in the output going to the heating element wires, the red and the black here, but it is AC. We're in the AC scale, and we'll turn it on and we'll see what kind of voltage we're looking at. And there we are, line voltage, 117 volts, and now it's pulsing on and off because the gun is up to temperature. Triac's kind of like a MOSFET, but it's for AC voltage. This is pretty much a meaningless test, but I thought we'd check the airflow rate out of this thing. So I've got it turned down to the lowest 20%, and she's putting out almost 1 kilometer per hour. There we are, we're at 1. Okay, we'll go up to, let's go up to 40%. Just over 3 kilometers, oh, almost 4 kilometers per hour. 5, and let's just go up to 100. And yeah, I've got the temperature turned right down to 100. Don't want to melt the wind meter here. Just over 10 kilometers per hour. So more than enough airflow for something like this. Let's finish up with some temperature readings and final thoughts here. So I've just got the multimeter out with the temperature probe. I've got the probe roughly, I don't know, about 8 millimeters in front of the nozzle tip. I just guesstimated roughly where I work on SMD stuff. And yeah, I've got it anywhere between probably 5 millimeters and 10 millimeters away from the board, the nozzle tips. So just went about 8 there. And we've got the unit set. Oops, let me just zoom out here. We've got it set at 100, and as you see, our meter is reading right around that as well. Oh, and I should mention, here's the screensaver. If you wanted to see what that's about, it's just moving the display around. So let's just dial this up to 200, see how accurate we are. You notice the temperature sensor in the gun is reacting quicker than the probe in front of the nozzle. It's because the probe on the gun is right on the ceramic element. So this one's saying it's right up to 200 now, but we're pretty close, not far behind. We're overshooting a bit, but it's probably going to start coming back down. And you know, depending on the airflow rate, how far you've got that probe in front or the tip, the temperature can vary quite a bit. So it's not an exact hot air reworks. You're blowing hot air on stuff, you know, it's not critical. If you do find you're out a lot and you wanted to play with it, you can adjust it. I'll show you on here. I'll just zoom in. Holy hell, what are you doing to the people, guy? Focus. There we go. So there's a little potentiometer here, and you can dial that clockwise or counterclockwise to dial the actual temperature up or down. Let's go up to 300. And as far as pros on the unit go, obviously the small form factor, that's the biggest one. These things aren't expensive. None of them are. None of these 858D hot air rework stations are. They're all around the $60, $70 mark. This is, you know, $65. And the reason I like it so much is because of the small form factor. It matches my KSGER T12 soldering station, so I can stack it on top of it or beside it and take up very little room on the bench. And you know, I like using the T12 soldering station so much. I like the single dial interface. I don't like push buttons on this kind of stuff. It's so nice just to use a dial. Good components, nice soldering job, everything's laid out nice. You can easily get you know, replacement heat guns or wands for it. They're inexpensive. The couple of drawbacks. One is it didn't come with the magnetic base to put it into standby mode when you put it in the base. So to me that's a big letdown. Why doesn't it just ship with this? You know, these are cheap. And again, I'm going to have links to this and the unit down below, but it should come with it in my opinion. Speaking of the base, because this is so small, not really sure where I'm going to mount it on it. I'm going to mount it on the side. I'm probably going to mount it on a separate stand. I'm going to make a stand for it because I don't really like when stuff's on the actual control head. I like having all the control equipment in the corner of the workbench, and then I can bring the units out and, you know, I can have the stand separate for the heat gun. But that's up to the individual. Banggood's packaging on this stuff, a layer of bubble wrap on fairly delicate stuff like this. To me, it's just not up to snuff. Put it in a box and then throw it in the old gray or orange bag. And I guess the last thing up is I wish it kind of came with the, you know, the GX connector from the factory. But that's what's fun about this kind of stuff, is modding it. So it makes for a neat little project. So if you're interested in one of these KSGER SMD rework stations, hopefully this just gives you a little more information on them. Shows you how the interface works, quality, that type of thing. Again, thanks to Banggood for sending it to me so I can show it to you guys, and links below in the description, all that good stuff. Cheers folks, have a good one.